Many of you probably don't remember, or in the distant past, televisions were much larger than they were, and we didn't have flat screen monitors for computers. Back then, what were used is something called a CRT, or a cathode ray tube. These were large monitor screens, and in the back of them, there was a gun that actually shot red, green, and blue light at the screen. If you went into a large box store like a Best Buy or any of those places that sold appliances, you might, as you walked in, saw the wall of televisions appear to, unless you were staring directly at one of them, they would appear to be flickering. This was due to the fact that the rods in your eye are very keen to see motion. And what it was actually doing was it was making out the gun in the back of the CRT scanning that screen back and forth. That sensitive, it could make that out. However, the other bad thing about cathode ray tubes is the fact that they emit a large amount of radiation. John Ott has a section here that I'm going to bring up and talks specifically about that.
In 1964, a paper was presented at the American Academy of Pediatrics meeting in New York City, mentioning a number of abnormal symptoms in young children referred to as the tired child syndrome. The severity of these symptoms seemed to be directly related to the amount of time the individual children spent watching television. These abnormal conditions were thought to be caused by an over-psychological stimulation resulting from the program content, that is, too many Western thrillers and murder mysteries. However, suspecting that X-rays from the TV sets might also be a possible contributing factor, I placed some bean plants in front of a TV 6 hours each weekday and 10 hours on Saturdays and Sundays, the same amount of time that the children were watching their TV sets. The bean plants on the right were protected with a solid lead shield that would stop X-rays and showed the same amount of growth as control plants placed at a distance of 50 feet. The bean plants on the left were shielded only with black photographic paper that would stop all visible light but would have no effect on the X-rays. You see an extremely stimulated growth with the leaves 2.5 or 3 times the size of the lead-shielded plants. The plants near the top or above the TV set showed the roots emerging from the soil, whereas the roots of the plants near the bottom or below the TV set followed their normal downward growth pattern. This has some very far-reaching implications, indicating that gravity may not be the controlling factor in the downward growth of the roots of plants, but that they may be growing away from the general background radiation that normally comes only from overhead because of the shielding effect of the massive amount of earth beneath. Next, I place some young white rats directly in front of the TV set with the same time periods as both the bean plants and the children exhibiting the tired child syndrome symptoms. Through semi-time-lapse photography, partially speeding up the action, you can see that the young rats on the left, protected only with the black photographic paper, became aggressive and more difficult to manage, whereas those on the right, protected with the lead shield, remained perfectly normal and docile. Autopsies were performed on all of these animals, which showed brain tissue damage in those protected only with the black paper, but not in those protected with the lead shielding. In another experiment, it was found that all of the TV sets in the homes of a group of hyperactive children being sent to a special adjustive educational center were giving off various amounts of X-rays, and when these sets were repaired or discarded, all of the children within a period of only a few months showed sufficient improvement so that they could be returned to their regular classes.
Now, also related to this is the fact that fluorescent lights, the ends of the fluorescent lights, the unshielded ends, are called the cathodes, and that's where the fluorescent light gets the electricity from that causes the gas inside of the tubes themselves to glow. Unshielded fluorescent lights also emit radiation, which can be detrimental. John has another little snippet here concerning a study that he did of a public school in the late 1960s. So we'll take a look at that.
In another experiment, time-lapse cameras were used in a standard first-grade classroom, and several hyperactive children may be noted, especially the boy in the immediate foreground. "90 days after the regular cool white fluorescent tubes were replaced with the new type full spectrum fluorescent tubes with radiation shields, there was a marked improvement noted, and the extremely hyperactive boy has voluntarily moved up to the front row. He raises his hand for recognition and is now up at the blackboard taking part in classroom activities. Prior to the time that this new lighting was installed, this particular boy had an extreme learning disability problem, but quickly learned to read within 90 days after the new lights were installed. There was further noted a general average improvement in both the behavior and academic achievement of the entire class. There are, however, other factors that must also be considered. The implications of the biological effects of light and radiation as observed through time-lapse photography are obvious. I sincerely hope that what started strictly as a hobby and intended only for entertainment purposes may help stimulate further greatly needed scientific studies in this very important area of research."
So there you have it, a couple of interesting sources of information related to lighting that you might not otherwise thought about, and places where lighting can actually be harmful due to the radiation that gets emitted. Anyway, I will see you guys in the next video.